The cemetery smelled of wet earth and decaying flowers, a scent that had become as familiar to me as my own heartbeat over the past 6 months. Rain dripped from the black umbrella I clutched with numb fingers, each drop echoing against the taut fabric like a countdown to something I couldn't name. My knees pressed into the muddy ground before the marble headstone, cold seeping through my thin dress, but I barely felt it anymore. Pain had become such a constant companion that physical discomfort seemed almost quaint. Alessandro Vittorio De Luca, beloved son, 1994-2025. The letters blurred as tears mixed with rain on my cheeks. I traced his name with trembling fingers, the smooth stone somehow both warm and glacial beneath my touch. 6 months. It had been 6 months since they'd told me he was dead, killed in an explosion at one of his warehouses. 6 months since they'd handed me a death certificate and a check I'd never cashed. 6 months since the world had turned gray and meaningless. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking like dried leaves. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." The wind picked up, carrying with it the sweet rot of funeral wreaths and something else, something expensive and dark that made my pulse quicken inexplicably. Cologne. Leather. Danger wrapped in silk. I dismissed it as memory, as my mind's cruel trick of conjuring his presence in every shadow, every whisper of wind. I'd met Alessandro De Luca on the worst night of my life, though I hadn't known it then. I'd been working a double shift at Rinaldi's, the kind of upscale restaurant where I was invisible. Just another server in black and white, filling water glasses for people who spent more on wine than I made in a month. My feet had ached, my stomach was empty, and I'd been fantasizing about my cramped studio apartment with its broken heater when I'd walked straight into him. Not metaphorically, literally walked into 6 feet of solid muscle and expensive fabric while balancing a tray of champagne flutes. Time had fractured into slow motion, the glasses tilting, champagne arcing through the air in golden streams, my heart stopping as I'd realized I was about to ruin someone's $1,000 suit. But his hands had shot out, impossibly fast, catching the tray before disaster struck. I'd looked up into the darkest eyes I'd ever seen. Black coffee and midnight and secrets that could swallow you whole. "Careful, Bellissima," he'd murmured, his voice like smoke and velvet, accented in a way that made my stomach flip. "These floors are treacherous." Behind him, 2 men in dark suits had moved closer, their hands disappearing inside their jackets. The entire restaurant had seemed to hold its breath. Later, I'd understand why. Everyone had recognized him except me. Alessandro De Luca, the young king of the city's underworld. The beautiful monster who'd inherited his father's empire at 25 and expanded it with ruthless efficiency. But in that moment, I'd only seen a man who'd saved me from unemployment and humiliation. A man whose thumb had brushed my wrist as he'd steadied the tray, sending electricity racing up my arm. "Thank you," I'd breathed, my face burning. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't watching where What's your name?" He'd interrupted, tilting his head as if I were a puzzle he needed to solve. "Emma. Emma Carter." "Emma." He'd tested my name on his tongue like expensive wine. "You're new here." 3 weeks, I'd admitted, unnerved by the intensity of his stare, by the way the world seemed to narrow to just the 2 of us despite the crowded restaurant. "I'm still learning the layout." "Then you need a guide." His lips had curved into something too dangerous to be called a smile. "Someone to show you where all the treacherous spots are." One of the suited men had stepped forward, murmuring something urgent in Italian. Alessandro had held up one hand, silencing him without breaking eye contact with me. "I have to work," I'd said, though something in me had wanted desperately to say yes to whatever he was offering. "I'll wait." And he had. Through my entire shift, he'd remained at a corner table, conducting business through barely perceptible gestures and whispered conversations with men who appeared and disappeared like smoke. I'd felt his eyes on me constantly, tracking my movements through the dining room, and every time I'd glanced his way, he'd been watching with an expression I couldn't decipher. Possession, protection, predation all wrapped into one. When my shift had ended, I'd found him waiting by the employee entrance, leaning against a black Mercedes with tinted windows so dark they looked like portals to another dimension. A driver stood at attention by the door. A mountain of a man with scars on his knuckles and a gun-shaped bulge under his jacket. "I should go home," I'd said, every instinct screaming that this man was dangerous, that I should run. "Then I'll take you home," he'd replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's late. The streets aren't safe. I take the bus every night. Not tonight." It wasn't a question. His hand had settled on the small of my back, burning through the thin fabric of my uniform, and I'd found myself sliding into the leather interior before I could form a coherent protest. The car had smelled like him, that intoxicating mixture of expensive cologne, leather, and something darker I couldn't name. Danger, maybe. Or destiny. "Where do you live, Emma?" His voice had wrapped around me in the darkness, intimate and commanding. I'd given him my address, my voice barely above a whisper, hyper-aware of his presence beside me, of the way his shoulder brushed mine with each turn, of how the city lights painted shadows across his sharp features. "This neighborhood," he'd murmured as we'd pulled up to my building. A converted factory in a part of town where streetlights flickered and sirens sang lullabies. "It's not safe for you. It's what I can afford." His jaw had tightened, something dark and possessive flashing in his eyes. "That will change." I should have been alarmed, should have recognized the promise thread in his words. Instead, I'd felt a flutter of something warm and dangerous in my chest. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Alessandro. Just Alessandro." He'd taken my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my pulse point that made my breath catch. "And this isn't goodbye, Emma Carter. I'll see you tomorrow. I don't work tomorrow. I know." His smile had been all teeth and shadows. "I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something beautiful." Before I could protest, before I could tell him that I didn't go on dates with strangers, that I didn't own anything beautiful, that this was insane, he'd pressed something into my palm, a business card with nothing but a phone number embossed in gold. "If you need anything before then," he'd said, his voice dropping to a register that made my skin prickle with heat. "Anything at all. You call this number. Capisce?" I'd nodded, mute and overwhelmed, and stumbled out of the car. I'd watched from my window as the Mercedes had idled at the curb for 20 minutes, not leaving until my light had turned on, until he'd been certain I was safe inside. That had been the beginning of my descent into Alessandro De Luca's world, a world of private tables at impossible-to-book restaurants, of drivers who appeared from nowhere, of men who stepped aside when we passed, of conversations conducted in Italian over my head while his hand remained possessively on my waist. A world where danger and beauty intertwined like lovers, where I'd felt more alive and more terrified than I'd ever been. He'd courted me with an intensity that had stolen my breath. Flowers appeared at my door daily. Not roses, but exotic blooms I couldn't name, each bouquet more extravagant than the last. He'd learned my schedule somehow, appearing at the end of each shift with that black Mercedes and its silent driver, refusing to let me take the bus, to walk through dark streets, to exist unprotected in his city. "You don't understand what you are," he'd told me one night, his fingers threading through my hair as we'd sat in his penthouse overlooking the glittering cityscape. "You're light in a world of shadows, Bellissima, and I'm too selfish to let the darkness touch you." "Then what does that make you?" I'd whispered, searching his beautiful, dangerous face. "Your darkness." His kiss had tasted like whiskey and sin. "The monster who'll burn the world to keep you safe." Now, kneeling at his grave, I pressed my forehead against the cold marble and sobbed. The rain intensified, drumming against my umbrella like accusations. I'd failed him. On the night of the explosion, I'd been at his penthouse, waiting for him to come home from a meeting he'd promised would be quick. The last thing he'd texted me was simple. "I love you, Emma. Everything I do is to build a life where you'll always be safe." 2 hours later, his right-hand man, Marco, had arrived at the penthouse with 3 other men, their faces grim. The warehouse had been rigged with explosives. Alessandro had been inside when it detonated. They'd found pieces of his custom-made watch, the one I'd given him for his 31st birthday. DNA confirmation had taken weeks, but the death certificate had been issued. They'd offered me money, a fortune that had made my head spin. Alessandro's will had included provisions for me, they'd said. But I'd refused everything except a small allowance to pay rent. Blood money felt wrong, and without him, what did any of it matter? I miss you, I choked out, my fingers clutching at the wet grass surrounding his headstone. I miss you so much I can't breathe. Every morning I wake up and forget you're gone, and then I remember, and it's like dying all over again. The cologne scent intensified, so strong now that I lifted my head, confused. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scanned the cemetery, but I saw only rain-blurred headstones and empty pathways between the mausoleums. Grief playing tricks, I told myself. My mind conjuring phantom traces of him because I couldn't accept that he was truly gone. I pulled myself to my feet, my legs stiff and aching. The sky had darkened to deep bruise purple, storm clouds gathering like judgment. I needed to leave, to return to my empty apartment, to face another night of his absence. That's when I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The hair on my neck rose, primal instinct screaming danger in a language older than words. I spun around, water flying from my umbrella, and caught movement in the shadows between two ornate mausoleums. A figure, tall, still, watching. My breath caught. For one insane, heart-stopping moment, my grief-addled brain registered the familiar broad shoulders. The particular way he held himself, coiled power wrapped in elegant stillness. Alessandro? His name escaped as barely a whisper, hope and madness warring in my chest. The figure stepped backward, melting into deeper shadow, and I realized my mistake. Just another mourner, probably disturbed by my dramatic grief. I pressed my hand to my racing heart, feeling foolish and empty and so alone I wanted to dissolve into the rain-soaked earth. I turned back to the grave one last time, pressing 2 fingers to my lips, and then to his name. I love you, I said. I'll always love you. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. As I walked away, umbrella tilted against the driving rain. I didn't see the figure emerge from the shadows. Didn't see him approach the grave with movements too fluid and familiar to be anyone else. Didn't see Alessandro De Luca, very much alive, stand before his own headstone and watch my retreating form with eyes that burned with something dark and desperate and devastatingly complex. But I felt it. In my bones. In my blood. In the space between heartbeats. I felt the weight of his gaze following me through the cemetery gates like a promise. Or a threat. Or perhaps, in Alessandro's world, they'd always been the same thing. The apartment felt like a tomb when I returned. Cold, silent, suffocating. I dropped my umbrella by the door, not caring about the water pooling on the hardwood Alessandro had insisted on having installed. You deserve beauty, Emma, he'd said, refusing to let me live in that factory conversion with its concrete floors and mold-stained walls. Within a week of our first date, he'd moved me here, to a renovated brownstone in a neighborhood where people actually smiled at each other, where the streetlights worked, where I'd felt guilty for accepting such extravagance. Now it just felt empty. I peeled off my wet dress, letting it fall in a heap on the bathroom floor. The mirror reflected a ghost, hollow cheeks, dark circles under red-rimmed eyes, collarbones too prominent beneath pale skin. I'd lost weight, stopped eating properly, stopped caring about anything beyond making it through each day without completely falling apart. The shower ran scalding hot, steam filling the small bathroom as I stood under the spray and let it mix with my tears. I pressed my palms against the tile. Expensive Italian marble Alessandro had chosen because the veining reminds me of your skin in candlelight, and tried to remember how to breathe. 6 months. How was it possible that 6 months could feel like 6 years and 6 seconds simultaneously? I dried off mechanically, pulled on one of Alessandro's shirts that I'd stolen from his penthouse, the soft black silk still carrying phantom traces of his scent, and collapsed onto the bed. Sleep would be elusive, as it always was. I'd lie here for hours, replaying memories, torturing myself with what-ifs and if-onlys, until exhaustion dragged me into nightmares where he died over and over in increasingly horrific ways. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, probably my manager at Rinaldi's, asking if I could pick up a shift. I'd returned to work 3 months after Alessandro's death, needing something to fill the endless hours, needing to feel useful, even though the thought of serving champagne to people who'd never known loss made me want to scream. But when I checked the screen, my blood turned to ice. Unknown number. You shouldn't visit the cemetery alone. It's not safe. My hands shook as I stared at the message. Wrong number? A sick joke? But something about the phrasing made my pulse race. Not the words themselves, but the familiar cadence, the particular concern about my safety that sounded like, no, impossible. I was losing my mind. I typed back with trembling fingers. Who is this? 3 dots appeared, pulsing, disappeared, appeared again. Unknown. Number. Someone who cares about your well-being. Lock your doors, Emma. Don't go out alone after dark. Emma. They knew my name. My breath came faster, panic and something else, something desperate and dangerous rising in my throat. This was sick. Someone was playing a cruel game, or I'd finally cracked completely, or... me. This isn't funny. Whoever you are, stop. Unknown number. I'm not laughing. There are people in this city who would hurt you to hurt me. Stay inside. Stay safe. To hurt me. Present tense. As if the sender was alive, was active, was someone whose enemies might target his loved ones. My vision blurred. The room spun. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the insane hope clawing through my chest like a wild animal. Me. Alessandro? No response. The dots didn't appear. Minutes ticked by in agonizing silence while I clutched the phone so hard my knuckles went white. Then, unknown number. Forget this number. Forget this conversation. Be safe, Bellissima. Bellissima. His word. His endearment. The phone slipped from my nerveless fingers and bounced on the mattress. I was hallucinating. Grief-induced psychosis. There was no other explanation. Alessandro was dead. I'd stood at his grave. I'd seen the death certificate. Marco had shown me the surveillance footage of the warehouse explosion. A fireball so intense, there had been almost nothing left to recover. But what if it had all been staged? The thought was insane. Impossible. Why would he fake his death? Why would he let me suffer for 6 months? Let me cry myself sick? Let me waste away believing he was gone? Unless he'd had no choice. Unless something had been so dangerous, so catastrophic, that dying had been the only way to protect. My door buzzer jolted me from spiraling thoughts. I jumped, heart hammering, and stared at the intercom like it might explode. It was nearly midnight. No one visited me anymore. I had no friends left. Alessandro's world had consumed me so completely that my old life had simply evaporated. The buzzer sounded again, more insistent. I crept to the intercom, pressed the button with shaking hands. Who is it? Ms. Carter? A male voice, professional and unfamiliar. I have a delivery for you. It's midnight. Yes, ma'am. I apologize for the late hour. My instructions were quite specific. Deliver tonight, regardless of the time. Instructions from whom? I should send him away. Should call the police. Should do anything except buzz a stranger into my building after receiving cryptic texts that had shattered my fragile grip on reality. Instead, I heard myself say, "Leave it in the lobby." "I'm afraid I can't do that, ma'am. I need your signature." Something in his tone, respectful but immovable, reminded me of Alessandro's men. That particular blend of courtesy and absolute certainty that their orders would be followed. "I'll be right down," I whispered. I pulled on jeans and kept Alessandro's shirt on like armor, like he could still protect me from beyond the grave. Or from wherever he actually was, if the impossible was somehow true. The hallway was empty, fluorescent lights humming their monotonous song. My footsteps echoed on the stairs as I descended to the lobby, each step feeling like a descent into something I couldn't name. Through the glass door, I could see him, a man in a dark suit, holding a large black box tied with silver ribbon. He stood perfectly still, patient in a way that suggested he'd wait all night if necessary. When he saw me, he nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that was almost military in its precision. I opened the door 6 inches, keeping the chain engaged. "Who sent you?" "I'm not at liberty to say, ma'am." His eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses despite the late hour. But I was told to assure you that you're safe. That you've always been safe, even when you didn't know it. My knees threatened to buckle. I need a name. He said you'd ask that. The man's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. He said to tell you, remember what I promised you that first night. Everything I do is to keep you safe. The world tilted. Those words, Alessandro had said them constantly. A mantra he'd repeated every time I'd questioned the armed men who'd appeared outside my building, every time I'd noticed the way people avoided us in public, every time I'd glimpsed the darkness beneath his beautiful surface. He's alive, I breathed. More prayer than statement. The man said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. He slid the box through the gap in the door, along with a sleek envelope, then stepped back. He's watching over you, Ms. Carter. He always has been. Even death couldn't change that. He touched 2 fingers to his temple in a gesture of respect, then turned and walked to a black SUV with tinted windows that I suddenly realized had been idling across the street for who knew how long. I watched him drive away, then stared down at the box in my trembling hands. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper so fine it felt like spider silk, I found a phone. Top of the line, already charged, with a single number programmed into the contacts. A. Just the letter. Just his initial. But it was enough to make me sink onto the lobby floor, clutching the phone to my chest as 6 months of grief transformed into something infinitely more complex. Relief and rage and confusion and desperate aching need. The envelope contained a single card, written in Alessandro's distinctive handwriting, bold strokes that had always reminded me of controlled violence. Emma, forgive me for what I've put you through. Forgive me for the pain I caused. I had no choice. They were coming for you, using you to destroy me. The only way to keep you safe was to die. But death couldn't keep me from you, Bellissima. I've watched over you every day, every cemetery visit, every shift at Rinaldi's, every sleepless night. I've been there, in the shadows, making sure no harm reached you. I know you have questions. I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but I need you to trust me one more time. Don't tell anyone about this. Not Marco, not anyone. The danger isn't over. There are people who would kill you just to punish me for sins you don't even know about. I'll explain everything soon. For now, keep this phone with you always. If you need me, truly need me, turn it on. I'll find you within minutes. You're my heart, Emma. My reason for breathing. Everything I've done. Every lie I've told. Every day I've stayed dead. It's all been for you. Yours. Even in death. A. I read the letter 17 times, memorizing every word, every curve of his handwriting, looking for proof that this was real and not some elaborate hallucination my broken mind had conjured. But the phone was solid in my hand, the paper real beneath my fingers, and the familiar ache in my chest had transformed into something wild and furious. He was alive. He'd let me mourn him. He'd watched me fall apart and done nothing. Because he loved me? Because danger still lurked in shadows I couldn't see? Or because Alessandro De Luca had always been a man who controlled everything, who made decisions for me for my own good, who loved me with a possessiveness that sometimes felt more like captivity than devotion? I stumbled back upstairs, locked every deadbolt, and sat on my bed staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to turn it on immediately, to demand answers, to scream at him for the agony he'd put me through. But another part, the part that had learned to navigate Alessandro's world of shadows and secrets, understood that turning on that phone would change everything, would pull me back into his orbit with a gravity I'd never been able to resist. I placed it in my nightstand drawer, next to the watch I'd given him that Marco had returned, the one supposedly recovered from the explosion, with its crystal cracked and band-scorched. Had that been staged too? Every piece of evidence carefully constructed to sell the lie of his death? My phone, my regular phone, buzzed again. Unknown number. Good girl. Keep it off until you're ready. But know this, Emma. I'm never far. I'll always be watching, always protecting. The world is more dangerous than you know, and you're the only thing in it I can't lose. Sleep now, Bellissima. I have men posted outside your building. No one will hurt you. Not while I'm breathing. I went to the window and looked down at the street. Sure enough, a black sedan sat parked 2 buildings down, its occupants invisible behind tinted windows. How long had they been there? Days? Weeks? Had I been under surveillance this entire time, mourning a man who was watching me grieve? The thought should have terrified me, should have sent me running to the police, to anyone who could protect me from this beautiful, dangerous man who loved me with an intensity that blurred the line between devotion and obsession. Instead, I felt something shift inside me, the grief that had been crushing me for 6 months, transforming into a different kind of pressure. Alessandro was alive. The love of my life, the monster who'd stolen my heart, the man I'd thought I'd lost forever. He was out there, breathing, watching, orchestrating my safety from the shadows. And tomorrow, I decided as I finally climbed under the covers, I was going to find out exactly what he'd been protecting me from, even if the truth destroyed me. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through my curtains, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floor. I'd slept fitfully, dreams bleeding into waking thoughts until I could no longer distinguish memory from nightmare, from impossible reality. The phone sat in my nightstand like a loaded gun, dormant but dangerous, promising answers I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. I showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater, and made coffee that tasted like ash in my mouth. Everything felt surreal, like I was moving through water, like the world had tilted slightly off its axis overnight, and I was the only one who noticed. The black sedan was still parked outside. In daylight, I could make out 2 figures in the front seats. Large men in dark clothing who didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Protecting me, Alessandro had said. But protection and prison sometimes wore the same face. I needed to think. Needed to process this somewhere away from the apartment that suddenly felt like a carefully constructed cage. Beautiful, but confining. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, but my phone buzzed before I could leave. Unknown. Number. Where are you going? My blood ran cold. He was watching. Right now. Either through the men outside or cameras I hadn't noticed or some other method I couldn't fathom. The cage wasn't just the apartment. It was everywhere Alessandro's influence reached, which in this city might as well be everywhere. I typed back with shaking hands. I need air. I need to think. Unknown number. Take the car. Driver will take you anywhere you want to go. You don't walk alone in this city, Emma. Not anymore. Me. I've been walking alone for 6 months. Unknown number. No. You've been thinking you were alone. There's a difference. The car, Bellissima, don't make me worry. The endearment. So familiar. So achingly him. Made my eyes sting. I wanted to refuse out of spite, out of the anger that was building beneath my confusion. But I also knew Alessandro. Knew that if I walked out that door, the black sedan would simply follow me at a crawl, making a spectacle of the very protection he'd supposedly arranged to keep me safe. Me. Fine, but I choose where we go. Unknown number. Of course. You've always had a choice, Emma. I've never forced you into anything. The lie was so audacious I almost laughed. Alessandro had forced me into everything. Into his world. Into his bed. Into a love so consuming it had rewritten every cell in my body. But he'd done it with such tenderness, such absolute certainty, that he knew what was best for me, that I'd mistaken captivity for devotion. Or maybe they'd always been the same thing with him. I walked outside, and the sedan's back door opened immediately, as if the driver had been waiting for my surrender. He was older than I expected, 60s maybe, with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he nodded to me. "Miss Carter," he said in accented English, his voice warm and respectful. "I'm Dante. I've had the honor of ensuring your safety these past months. You've been following me?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Protecting," he corrected gently. "There's a difference. Mr. DeLuca, he loves you very much. What he did, faking his death, it nearly destroyed him, but there were people, very dangerous people, who would have used you to break him. He had no choice." I slid into the back seat, surrounded by leather that smelled like Alessandro, like every car he'd ever driven me in. Everyone has choices, Dante. Not men like Mr. DeLuca. Dante pulled into traffic with practiced ease. When you love someone more than you love yourself, more than you love your own life, the choices become very simple. You do whatever it takes to keep them breathing. Everything else is just details, even if it destroys the person you're protecting. Dante's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, and I saw something there: sympathy, understanding, and beneath it all, unwavering loyalty to the man who'd apparently orchestrated my entire existence for the past 6 months. "Where would you like to go, Miss Carter?" I almost said the cemetery, wanted to stand before that false grave and rage at the lie of it. But something stopped me. If Alessandro was watching, if he had people everywhere, going to his grave felt like capitulating, like accepting his narrative instead of demanding my own. "The harbor," I said instead. "The old pier, where the fishermen dock." It was the one place in the city Alessandro had never taken me. Too public, too working class, too far from his world of velvet ropes and private rooms. He'd kept me in a carefully curated bubble of luxury and safety, never letting me see the rougher edges of his city. The places where his influence showed its teeth. Dante drove in silence, and I watched the neighborhood shift through the tinted windows, from my genteel brownstone area, to commercial districts, to industrial zones where the buildings wore their age like scars. The harbor opened before us, gray-green water stretching toward a horizon choked with cargo ships and morning mist. I got out before Dante could open my door, needing to assert some small measure of independence. The wind off the water bit through my jacket, carrying salt and fish and diesel fuel. Real smells, honest smells, nothing like the expensive perfume of Alessandro's world. "I'll be right here," Dante said, leaning against the car with his arms crossed, his eyes constantly scanning the area with practiced vigilance. I walked to the edge of the pier and stood watching fishing boats bob on the swells, their paint peeling, their nets tangled with the morning's catch. Men shouted to each other in languages I didn't understand, their hands rough and capable, their faces weathered by sun and sea. This was reality. Harsh and beautiful and utterly indifferent to the dramas people constructed in their desperate attempts to control fate. My phone buzzed. Not the secret one, my regular phone. "Unknown number. You chose well. I've never taken you to the harbor. Too many uncontrolled variables. Too many sightlines I can't monitor. It makes me nervous. Bellissima." I spun around, scanning the pier, the boats, the warehouses lining the shore. Where was he? How close? Was he watching through a scope? Through binoculars? Through cameras I couldn't see? Me. Good. You should be nervous. You should feel a fraction of what I've felt these past 6 months. Unknown number. I felt every second of your pain, Emma. Watched you cry at my grave and couldn't comfort you. Watched you waste away and couldn't feed you. Watched you walk through this city like a ghost and couldn't breathe life back into you. Don't tell me I haven't suffered. Me. Then why? Why not just tell me? Why let me believe you were dead? The response took longer this time. I could almost feel him choosing his words, weighing what truth he could afford to give me. Unknown number. Because the people hunting me, they're very good at torture, very creative with pain. And your face, Emma, your beautiful, expressive face. You can't lie. If you'd known I was alive, they would have seen it. Would have known I'd faked my death, would have torn you apart to find me. Me. Who? Who wanted you dead? Unknown number. The Russo family. My father's oldest enemies. They've been planning this for years, waiting for me to show weakness, to care about something more than the business. When I met you, when I couldn't hide what you meant to me, I handed them the weapon to destroy me. Me. So, you destroyed us instead. Unknown number. I saved you. There's a difference. I wanted to throw the phone into the harbor, watch it sink beneath the gray-green water and take his justifications with it, but my hands clutched it like a lifeline, like the only connection I had to the man I'd thought I'd lost. Me. Where are you right now? Are you close? Unknown. Number. Close enough to reach you in 30 seconds if danger appears. Far enough that you can have your space, your anger, your moment of freedom on this pier. Me. This isn't freedom. Freedom would be not having Dante watching my every move, Not having you track my phone, not living in an apartment you control, in a city you own. Unknown number. You're right. I've never given you freedom, Emma. I've given you safety, luxury, devotion, obsession. Everything except the choice to walk away from me. Because I'm selfish. Because loving you is the only human thing about me. And I won't apologize for protecting what's mine. What's mine. The possessiveness in those words should have terrified me. Should have sent me running to whatever authorities could protect civilians from men like Alessandro De Luca. But it didn't. It never had. Because some twisted part of me had always craved his obsession, his absolute certainty that I belonged to him, his willingness to burn the world to keep me safe. Me. I'm not a possession. Unknown number. No. You're my heart beating outside my body. You're every weakness I've ever had wrapped in skin I want to worship. You're the reason I faked my death and the reason I can't stay dead. You're everything, Emma. And that terrifies me more than any bullet ever could. A commotion erupted near one of the warehouses, shouting in Italian, the screech of tires, a single gunshot that cracked the morning air like breaking bone. Dante was beside me instantly, his hand on my arm, already pulling me toward the car with urgent efficiency. We need to go. Now. What's happening? Please, Ms. Carter. No questions, just move. More shouting, more shots. Fishermen scattered like startled birds, abandoning their nets and running for cover. Dante shoved me into the back seat and the car was moving before my door even closed, tires squealing as we accelerated away from the harbor. My phone rang. The secret one. The one that had been silent in my nightstand. I fumbled it out of my jacket pocket with shaking hands. Are you hurt? Alessandro's voice, rough with fear and fury, filled the car. Not a text, not a distant message. His actual voice, wrapping around me like arms I'd thought I'd never feel again. I'm fine. Dante got me out. What's happening? The Russos. They've been watching you too, waiting to see if my death was real or if I'd slip up. Make contact. I should have known they'd have the harbor staked out. It's one of their territories. He was breathing hard, talking fast, and beneath his words I could hear other sounds, running feet, urgent Italian, the metallic click of weapons being loaded. Dante, take her to the safe house, the one in the financial district. Yes, sir, Dante said, already adjusting course. Wait, I protested. I don't want to go to a safe house. I want answers. You want to stay alive? Alessandro cut me off, his voice dropping to that tone, the one that was simultaneously tender and absolutely immovable. And right now, that means you go where I tell you. We'll talk, Bellissima. I promise. But first, I need to handle this. Handle what? Alessandro, what are you going to do? Silence, heavy with implications I didn't want to examine. What I've always done, he finally said, his voice cold in a way that reminded me exactly what kind of man I'd fallen in love with. Protect what's mine, by any means necessary. The line went dead, leaving me in the leather-scented darkness of the car with Dante's worried eyes in the rearview mirror and the taste of fear on my tongue. I'd wanted answers, wanted truth, wanted to confront the man who'd let me mourn him. But as we sped through the city streets toward some unknown safe house, I realized I'd gotten exactly what I'd asked for. A glimpse of the real danger Alessandro had been protecting me from, the darkness he moved through with such deadly grace, and I was no longer certain I wanted to know what happened when that darkness finally consumed everything in its path. The safe house wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined something industrial. Concrete walls, reinforced doors, the sterile functionality of a panic room. Instead, Dante delivered me to a penthouse in the financial district, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art, a space that screamed wealth and power rather than hiding and fear. Mr. De Luca owns the building, Dante explained as he ushered me inside, his hand hovering near the small of my back in a gesture so reminiscent of Alessandro it made my chest ache. Top 3 floors. Most secure location in the city. No one gets in without biometric clearance and his personal authorization. The elevator had required Dante's fingerprint and a 16-digit code. We'd risen in silence, my ears popping as we climbed. The the city shrinking below us until it looked like a toy. All glass and steel and tiny moving pieces that Alessandro apparently controlled from shadows I'd never fully understood. "How long do I have to stay here?" I asked, walking to the windows and looking out at the skyline. From this height, I could see the harbor in the distance, smoke rising from where the shooting had occurred. Police lights flashed blue and red, converging on the scene we'd fled. "As long as it takes," Dante said carefully. "Mr. DeLuca will come as soon as it's safe. There's food in the kitchen, clothes in the bedroom, your size. He's thought of everything." Of course he had. Alessandro always thought of everything, orchestrating my life with the same precision he applied to his criminal empire. The realization should have angered me. Instead, I felt exhausted, 6 months of grief giving way to a weariness so profound it seemed to settle into my bones. "Will you stay?" I didn't want to be alone, not now. Not with gunshots still echoing in my memory, and the knowledge that people wanted to hurt me simply because Alessandro loved me. "I'll be right outside the door," Dante promised. "You're safe here, Miss Carter. I give you my word." After he left, I explored the penthouse like a prisoner examining her cell. The bedroom contained a walk-in closet filled with clothes, all my size, all my style, outfits I'd never seen but that Alessandro had somehow known I'd choose. Dresses in jewel tones, soft sweaters, jeans that would fit perfectly. It was like walking into a museum of myself, curated by someone who knew me better than I knew myself. The bathroom held my preferred brands of shampoo, my face cream, even the specific type of toothbrush I used. The attention to detail was staggering, invasive, touching, terrifying. How long had he been planning this? How many months or years had he been preparing for the possibility that he'd need to fake his death, that he'd need a place to hide me, that his world would eventually require my disappearance into luxury and isolation? I found wine in the kitchen, a Barolo I recognized from dinners we'd shared, from nights when he'd held me against his chest and murmured Italian endearments I'd never quite understood. I poured a glass with shaking hands and returned to the windows, watching the city pulse with life I could no longer touch. Hours passed. The sun tracked across the sky, painting the buildings gold, then orange, then deep purple. My phone, both phones, remained silent. I imagined Alessandro out there somewhere, handling the Russo situation with whatever methods men like him employed. Violence, probably. Bloodshed. The darkness he'd always kept carefully hidden from me, protecting my innocence even as he stole my freedom. Night fell. City lights blazed to life like 1,000 fallen stars. I was starting to think he wouldn't come, that I'd spend the night alone in this beautiful cage, when I heard the elevator doors open. Every muscle in my body tensed. I turned from the windows slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack bone. And there he was, Alessandro DeLuca, alive. Real. Standing in the doorway like a ghost made flesh, like every prayer and curse I'd screamed into the darkness for 6 months had finally been answered. He looked different, leaner, harder, with shadows under his eyes that mirrored my own. His hair was slightly longer, curling at his collar. He wore all black, tactical pants, a fitted shirt that showed the lean muscle beneath. There was blood on his hands, not his blood, I somehow knew. Someone else's sacrifice to keep me safe. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The air between us felt charged, dangerous, like the moment before lightning strikes when every hair stands on end and the world holds its breath. Emma. My name on his lips, that voice I'd thought I'd never hear again, broke something inside me. I wanted to run to him, wanted to slap him, wanted to collapse at his feet and sob with relief that he was real, solid, breathing. Instead, I stayed frozen by the windows, the wine glass trembling in my hand. "You're alive," I whispered, stating the obvious because my brain couldn't form more complex thoughts. "I'm alive." He took one step forward, his movements careful, like he was approaching a wounded animal. "I know you're angry. I know you hate me. You have every right to—" "I don't hate you." The words burst out before I could stop them. "I've tried. God knows I've tried. But I can't hate you, Alessandro. I can only hate myself for still loving you after what you put me through. His expression cracked, pain flashing across his beautiful face. Bellissima. Don't. I held up my hand, stopping him. Don't call me that. Don't use the words you used when I thought we were building something real, not when everything was a lie. Not everything. He moved closer, inexorable as a tide. My love for you. That was never a lie. Every word I said, every promise I made, all of it was true. The only lie was my death, and I did that to keep you breathing. By making me wish I wasn't, my voice broke. I wanted to die, Alessandro. Those first months after they told me you were gone, I wanted to follow you. The only thing that stopped me was the thought that you'd be disappointed if I gave up. And all that time you were watching? You saw what it did to me and you did nothing? I did everything. His voice roughened with emotion. I killed 17 men in the past 6 months. 17 Russo soldiers who got too close to you, who asked questions about you, who even looked at you wrong. I burned down 3 of their operations. I've been waging a war in the shadows to keep you safe while they thought I was dead. While they couldn't use you against me. I didn't ask for that. The wine glass shattered against the floor, red liquid spreading like blood across the white marble. I didn't ask you to kill for me. I didn't ask you to lie to me. I just wanted you. The real you. The truth. Even if it was dangerous. The truth would have gotten you tortured. He was close enough now that I could smell him. Gunpowder and smoke layered over his familiar cologne. The Russos, they don't just kill, Emma. They make art out of suffering. They would have taken you apart piece by piece, kept you alive for days, weeks, just to make me surrender everything I've built. And you, your beautiful, honest face. You can't hide what you feel. If you'd known I was alive, they would have seen it. Would have known. So you made the choice for me, again. I pressed my palms against his chest, meaning to push him away, but my hands just stayed there, feeling his heartbeat, fast and hard and real. You always make the choices, Alessandro. Where I live, how I'm protected, who I can see, what I can know. You've built a golden cage and called it love. Yes. He covered my hands with his, and I could feel the dried blood flaking under my fingers. Yes. I built you a cage, because the alternative was watching you fly into danger I couldn't protect you from. Because I'm a selfish bastard who would rather have you safe and angry than free and dead. Because losing you isn't an option I can survive. His other hand came up to cut my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with infinite tenderness. I know what I am, Bellissima. I'm a monster. I traffic in violence and fear. I've done things that would make you sick if you knew the details. But with you, you're the only good thing in my rotten life. The only pure thing I've ever touched. And I'll do anything. Become anyone. Sacrifice anything to keep you safe. Even if it means you hate me. Even if it means watching you mourn me from the shadows. Tears stream down my face, hot and bitter. I can't do this. I can't live like this. Never knowing what's real. Always wondering if you're about to disappear again. If some new threat will require you to fake your death, or lock me away, or make decisions about my life without consulting me. Then leave. The words seemed to cost him everything. His hand dropped from my face and he stepped back, creating distance that felt like an ocean between us. The elevator code is 12042024, December 4th, 2024. The day I knew I loved you. Walk away, Emma. Take the money I left for you. Start over somewhere far from this city, far from me. I'll have Dante drive you anywhere you want to go, and I swear on my life, I'll never contact you again. You'll be free. I stared at him, searching his face for the lie, for the manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and love, and a resignation so profound it looked like death. You'd let me go, I whispered. After everything, the killing, the lying, the watching over me, you'd just let me walk away if it's what you need to be happy. His jaw clenched, every word clearly agony. I've taken everything from you, Emma. Your freedom, your peace, 6 months of your life. The least I can do is give you a choice now. Stay or go. But know this. If you stay, nothing changes. I'll still be overprotective. I'll still make decisions I think will keep you safe. I'll still love you with an intensity that probably isn't healthy, because I can't change what I am." The city glittered behind him, 1,000 points of light in the darkness. Somewhere out there, the Russo family was planning their next move. Somewhere, danger lurked in forms I couldn't imagine. And here, in this penthouse fortress, stood the man who'd loved me enough to die for me. Or at least to let me think he'd died. "What happened at the harbor?" I asked, instead of answering. "The shooting. What did you do?" His expression hardened, becoming the face of the man who ruled the underworld. "The Russos had men watching you. When you showed up at their territory, they thought I'd revealed myself, that I'd gotten sloppy. They were going to take you. So I took them first. Took them. Killed them." He didn't flinch from the words. "All 4. Quick and clean. Then I sent their bodies back to Dmitri Russo with a message. Emma Carter is under my protection. Anyone who touches her signs their death warrant." "But you're supposed to be dead. Won't that—" "Doesn't matter anymore." He shrugged, and I saw the weight of exhaustion in his shoulders. "I can't stay dead if it means watching you walk into danger. The Russos know now, or they'll know soon enough. Alessandro De Luca is alive, and he's coming for them. It's war now, Bellissima. Open war. And you're the reason I'm willing to burn everything to the ground. I should have been horrified. Should have run for that elevator and never looked back. But standing there, looking at this beautiful, deadly man who'd killed for me, lied for me, died for me, I realized I'd known all along what my choice would be. I'd known it the moment I'd seen him standing in the doorway. Maybe I'd known it 6 months ago, when I'd first walked into his orbit and felt the gravity of his obsession pulling me in. "I need you to promise me something," I said quietly. Hope flared in his dark eyes. "Anything. No more lies. No more faking deaths or making decisions without me. If there's danger, you tell me. If there's a threat, we face it together. I won't be kept in the dark anymore, Alessandro. I can't survive it. Emma, promise me." I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. "Or I walk away right now, and you'll never see me again." He studied my face for a long moment, and I could see the war raging behind his eyes. The instinct to protect me from knowledge that could hurt me battling with the desperate need to keep me in his life. Finally, he nodded. "I promise. No more lies. No more secrets. You'll know everything. The good, the bad, the bloody. Even if it means you see me for the monster I really am." "I already know what you are," I whispered, reaching up to touch his face, feeling stubble rough against my palm. "I've always known. I just needed you to trust me enough to stop hiding it." His arms came around me then, pulling me against his chest with a desperation that stole my breath. I felt his heart hammering, felt the tension drain from his body, felt the wetness of tears against my hair as this powerful, dangerous man broke apart in my arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered into my hair, the words broken and raw. "I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you. For watching you suffer and not being able to comfort you. For putting my fear above your right to know the truth. I'm sorry, Bellissima. I'm so goddamn sorry." I held him as tightly as he held me. 2 broken people clinging to each other in a penthouse fortress while the city burned below. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. That would take time, honesty, and a rebuilding of trust he'd shattered. But it was a beginning. And as Alessandro's lips found mine in a kiss that tasted like tears and blood and desperate need, I realized that some cages are easier to bear when you understand exactly why the door is locked, even if the key remains in someone else's hands. The war came faster than either of us expected. 3 days after Alessandro revealed himself to be alive, the Russos retaliated. A car bomb outside one of Alessandro's legitimate businesses, a restaurant in the theater district where families ate Sunday dinners and tourists took photos of pasta dishes. 12 injured, 3 dead. Collateral damage in a conflict those people didn't even know existed. I watched the news coverage from the penthouse, my hands shaking as Alessandro stood behind me, his phone pressed to his ear, barking orders in rapid Italian. His hand rested on my shoulder, heavy, possessive, anchoring me to him even as his world exploded into open warfare. "They're trying to draw me out," he said after ending the call, his voice tight with controlled fury. Hitting civilian targets to force my hand, to make me sloppy. They want me angry. Aren't you? I turned to face him. 3 days of honesty had shown me sides of Alessandro I'd only glimpsed before. The calculating strategist who moved men like chess pieces, the cold executioner who ordered deaths with the same ease as ordering dinner, the exhausted human beneath the monster, who sometimes looked at me like I was the only thing keeping him from dissolving entirely. I'm furious. His jaw clenched. But fury doesn't win wars. Strategy does. Patience does. Knowing your enemy's weaknesses and exploiting them without mercy. What are their weaknesses? He studied my face, and I could see him weighing how much truth to give me, how much darkness to let me see. Finally, he pulled me to the dining table where maps and photos were spread like evidence of sins. Dimitri Russo has 3 sons. The oldest, Victor, runs their drug operations. The middle, Alexei, handles enforcement. He's the one who would have tortured you if they'd taken you. The youngest, Mikhail, is supposed to be studying business at Oxford, keeping his hands clean for when they need a legitimate face. Supposed to be? Alessandro's smile was all teeth and shadows. Mikhail has a gambling problem. Loses hundreds of thousands at underground poker games. He's also been skimming from his father's operations to pay his debts. Dimitri doesn't know yet, or didn't until I sent him proof this morning. I stared at the surveillance photos. A young man who looked barely 20, handsome in the way of people who'd never known hardship, photographed at casinos, private games, meetings with bookies who had Alessandro's people written all over them. You're going to turn his family against each other. I'm going to give Dimitri a choice, Alessandro corrected. Lose his youngest son to his own paranoia, or back down and accept that I'm untouchable. Either way, the Russos tear themselves apart from the inside while I keep my hands relatively clean. It was brilliant. Ruthless. Exactly the kind of calculated violence that made Alessandro De Luca so dangerous. And I was complicit now, sitting at his war table, understanding his strategies, accepting the blood that would be spilled in my name. Will it work? I asked quietly. Dimitri loves his sons, but he loves power more. When he realizes Mikhail has been stealing from him, compromising the family, Alessandro shrugged. He'll make an example, and his other sons will remember that family loyalty means nothing against betrayal. Over the next week, I watched Alessandro orchestrate the Russo family's implosion with surgical precision. Anonymous tips to Dimitri about Mikhail's activities, photographic evidence of the money trail, rumors planted among the Russo soldiers about which son would inherit leadership. Every move calculated to create maximum chaos with minimum direct involvement. I learned the rhythm of his world, phone calls at 3 a.m, men arriving with reports and leaving with orders. The constant awareness that death could arrive at any moment. Dante and a rotating crew of guards surrounded the penthouse 24 hours a day. Alessandro barely slept, existing on espresso and adrenaline, and the fierce need to protect what was his. You should rest, I told him one night, finding him at the windows, staring out at the city he owned through violence and fear. Can't. He didn't turn around. The moment I close my eyes, I see you at that harbor. See what would have happened if Dante had been 1 second slower, if I hadn't had men positioned there. I see them taking you, hurting you, using you to destroy me, and I can't. His voice broke. I can't survive that image, Emma. So I stay awake. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, pressing my cheek against his back, feeling the tension in his muscles. I'm here. I'm safe. You kept your promise. For now. His hands covered mine, holding them against his chest where his heart beat too fast. But there's always another threat, always someone who wants what I have, who sees you as the weakness they can exploit. Being with me means living like this. Guards, safe houses, always looking over your shoulder. Is this really what you want? It was the question he'd been asking in a dozen different ways since I'd chosen to stay. And every time I gave him the same answer. I want you. The rest comes with the territory. He turned in my arms, cupping my face with hands that had killed men for me, that trembled slightly as they touched me. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Maybe. I stood on my toes, pressing my lips to his. But you're what I chose, cage and all. His kiss was desperate, consuming, full of the fear and need and obsessive love that defined everything about us. We made love against the windows, the city watching our shadows move against the glass, and I understood that this was my life now. Beautiful and terrifying, passionate and dangerous. A love story written in blood and devotion. The endgame came 2 weeks after the war began. Dmitri Russo called for a meeting. Neutral ground. A private room at a hotel neither family controlled. Alessandro brought 6 men. I insisted on coming despite his protests, and we arrived to find Dmitri with an equal number of guards and the weight of a broken empire on his shoulders. He was older than I expected, 60s, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen too much violence and inflicted more. He looked at me with something between curiosity and hatred, and I understood that in his world, women were possessions to be used, not people with agency. "So this is the girl worth dying for," Dmitri said in heavily accented English, his gaze raking over me in a way that made Alessandro's hand tighten possessively on my waist. "She must be exceptional in bed to inspire such devotion. Watch your mouth." Alessandro's voice dropped to that dangerous register, the one that preceded violence, "or I'll remove your tongue and feed it to you." Dmitri laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've won, DeLuca. My youngest son is dead. I killed him myself when I discovered his treachery. My other sons barely speak to me, afraid they'll be next. My organization is in chaos. You got what you wanted. I wanted you to understand that Emma Carter is off limits," Alessandro said coldly, "that touching her, threatening her, even looking at her wrong means death for you and everyone you love. Have I made that clear, Crystal?" Dimitri's jaw clenched. "But understand this. You've made an enemy today who will never forget. Someday, when you're old and weak, when she's..." He gestured at me with contempt. "Dead or left you. When you have something else you love more than your own life, I'll be there. Or my sons will. Or their sons. The Russos never forget. Then I'll kill every Russo that comes for what's mine." Alessandro pulled me closer, his arm like iron around my waist. "Generation after generation, until your family line dies screaming." "That's my promise, Dmitri. Test me. And find out if I'm bluffing." The 2 men stared at each other, old violence and young ambition. 2 predators acknowledging mutual destruction. Finally, Dmitri nodded once and stood, his men following. "Enjoy your victory, DeLuca. I hope she's worth the price you'll eventually pay." After they left, Alessandro pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my hair. "It's over. You're safe now. The Russos won't touch you. They can't afford another war, not with their family fractured. Is it really over?" I pulled back to look at his face, searching for truth. "For now." He brushed hair from my face with infinite tenderness. "There will always be other threats, other families who test me, other moments of danger. But the immediate crisis, yes, it's over. We won." That night, Alessandro took me back to his real penthouse. Not the safe house, but the home we'd shared before his death. The place where I'd spent that last night waiting for him to come back from a meeting he'd never returned from. It smelled the same, looked the same. But everything had changed. "I want to show you something," he said, leading me to his office, a room I'd never been allowed to enter before. Inside, one entire wall was covered with surveillance photos. Of me. Hundreds of them. Taken over 6 months. Me at the cemetery, me at work. Me walking through the city, me sleeping in my apartment, a shrine to his obsession, evidence of every moment he'd spent watching over me while I'd thought he was dead. "This is what I meant about being a monster," he said quietly. "This is the depth of my obsession with you, Emma. I couldn't let go, couldn't trust anyone else with your safety. Every moment you were breathing, I needed to see it, to know you were okay. It's not normal. It's not healthy. It's you." I touched one of the photos, me crying at his grave, devastation clear on my face. "You watched me break apart, and it killed me." His voice roughened. "Every tear, every time you wasted away, I felt it. But I couldn't reveal myself, couldn't risk you. So I watched and I waited, and I planned how to destroy anyone who'd ever threatened you. I should have been horrified, should have seen this wall of photos as evidence of unhealthy obsession, of possession, masquerading as love, but standing there, looking at the visual proof of his devotion, twisted as it was, I understood something fundamental about us. We were both broken, both desperate, both willing to destroy ourselves for the other. It wasn't a fairy tale, it wasn't healthy, but it was real, and it was ours, and I couldn't imagine my life without the intensity of his love anymore. "Take them down," I said. "All of them. You don't need to watch me through cameras anymore. I'm here, I'm yours. I'm not going anywhere. Emma." "I mean it, Alessandro. No more surveillance. No more watching from shadows. If you want to know how I am, ask me. If you want to protect me, stand beside me. We do this together from now on, or not at all." He pulled me against him, and I felt him shaking, with relief, with need, with the overwhelming emotion of a man who'd taught himself not to feel and was now drowning in sensation. "Together," he agreed. "Always together." We made love in his office, surrounded by photos he'd later burn, and I understood that this was my redemption. Not from him, but from myself. I'd chosen this man, this life, this beautiful, dangerous love that would probably destroy us both eventually. But for now, wrapped in Alessandro's arms with the city lights painting shadows across our skin, I was exactly where I belonged. 3 months later, we married in a private ceremony with only Dante and a handful of Alessandro's most trusted men present. No white dress, no church, no pretense that this was anything but what it was. A declaration of ownership that went both ways. A promise sealed in blood and devotion. "You're sure?" Alessandro asked one last time as we stood before the officiant. "There's no going back from this, Bellissima. You'll be mine forever, in this life and whatever comes after." I kissed him, tasting coffee and mint, and the particular flavor of danger that would always define us. "I was yours the moment I walked into you at Rinaldi's. This is just making it official. The life we built together wasn't easy. Alessandro's world demanded constant vigilance, occasional violence, and the knowledge that happiness was something we'd have to fight for every single day. But it was ours. Messy and passionate and real in a way I'd never experienced before. I learned to shoot, to watch for threats, to move through his world with the grace of someone who belonged there. He learned to share his plans with me, to trust me with the darkness he'd always tried to hide, to understand that protecting me didn't mean keeping me ignorant. And on the nights when nightmares woke him, dreams of losing me, of watching me die in scenarios he couldn't prevent, I held him and whispered promises that I wasn't going anywhere, that we'd face every threat together, that love this intense was worth any price. Standing at the windows of our penthouse months after his resurrection, Alessandro's arms around me and our child growing inside me, I finally understood the truth about cages. Sometimes they're not prisons. Sometimes they're sanctuaries. Sometimes the bars that keep the world out also keep love in, fierce and obsessive and absolutely unbreakable. Alessandro had built me a cage of devotion and called it protection, and I'd walked into it willingly, locked the door behind me, and thrown away the key. Because some kinds of captivity are just another word for home.